Hi everybody, this is Tom Callahan with Cyber Risk. Today I'm going to talk about a topic which we actually get a lot of questions about. Is cloud computing a risk? It's a kind of an interesting and very broad question. If you've seen some of my other videos about risk management, you can probably predict I'm going to talk a little bit about risk scenarios and value chains. But let's go back to the question. So, is cloud computing a risk? So an easy but not very useful answer is no. Cloud computing is not a risk. It's a way of delivering an IT service. But that's not really what people are asking here. I think the real question is, what are the risk scenarios associated with delivering IT services using a cloud-based model? So we're going to talk a bit about digging into cloud computing in that context, understanding really what are the risk scenarios relative to your organization and your business model. And I guess really most importantly is, what is the real question here? What decision are we trying to make? Let's break this question down a bit further and think about what is the decision. So what's the real question here is cloud computing a risk? So are we concerned about existing cloud services in the organization? And perhaps, are they at risk? Do we have the right controls in place? Or maybe we have an organization who are thinking about embarking upon a new cloud services strategy, maybe moving critical services to the cloud, and then thinking about really what's the return on investment and what's the risk versus reward of doing that. In order to address both these questions, the first thing to think about is, what digital assets am I considering putting into the cloud or already running in the cloud? And then what risk scenarios are associated with those assets in the context of providing them via a cloud service. Let's talk a bit about some scenarios within a cloud delivery model. Cloud delivery is like any other IT service. You're going to have risk scenarios which are pretty much the same. You're going to have the risk of your cloud service being breached perhaps by an external threat actor via components that you manage yourself. You're going to have risk scenarios where you might have privileged insiders who have access to confidential data in the cloud, and again, you are responsible for those controls. And these are kind of the same really as running a service yourself in a non-cloud model. I think when people talk about cloud risk, they're more concerned about scenarios which are specific to a cloud delivery model. I guess one of the big ones is that what happens if the cloud provider themselves gets breached? What happens if the cloud provider goes out of business? Maybe in a geopolitical context, if your cloud provider is based in a different continent or a different region, what happens if something happens which prevents that cloud provider from selling their services into your country? And I think these are the type of risk scenarios people are concerned about. How do we kind of answer the question, are they a risk or not? Well, we can break the scenarios down and think about building out, I guess, what we call our risk universe. So what are all the different scenarios associated with something like the availability of the service due to some kind of provider issue? What's the probability of them occurring? What can we do about maybe reducing that probability? And what's the impact? Another example of a cloud provider scenario is that once I create a service or a product in a particular cloud provider, can I migrate it somewhere else? If the cost increases, or there's some other kind of external factor which leads me to wanting to change, for example, a merger and acquisition, can I do that kind of migration? So once we've defined these scenarios, which are unique to a cloud service model, what's the next step? I think that the original question was, okay, should we move to the cloud? Should we change our controls? But moving to the cloud has benefit in terms of things like time to market, potentially cost, but it would also have risk, and we can look at basically looking at that kind of equilibrium between risk versus reward. That can be done by taking a CRQ approach to managing risk in financial terms and comparing it to maybe the business benefits of a quicker time to market, but also kind of balancing that with some of the maybe other risks associated with not having full control of your environment. And taking this CRQ-based approach to answering that initial question, is cloud computing a risk, is a lot easier way in which to deal with this topic using defendable data points. So thank you for listening to this video on cloud computing and the risks associated with that delivery model. It's a complex topic. I'm sure I haven't answered your question. There is no right answer to that question actually. It's going to be unique for every organization, and taking a CRQ-based risk scenario approach is one way to build up a body of defendable data to help you make that decision for your environment. Thank you.